Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're doing okay today. So, in my previous episode, I spoke about the first man I met through a dating app and how emotionally confusing that experience became for me. And after posting that episode, I spent a lot of time thinking about something. That experience actually wasn't an isolated incident. The more people I met after that, whether through arranged marriage, setup, or dating apps, the more I started noticing the same emotional patterns repeating in different forms. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons I even started this podcast in the first place. Because for a long time, I carried a lot of shame around these experiences. I kept thinking I'm out of date with modern dating and I might be the problem or expecting too much. But the more conversation I started having with women, both online and offline, the more I realized how many of us are silently going through similar experiences while pretending everything is fine. And I think I wanted this podcast to become a space where women could talk about these things honestly without feeling embarrassed, dramatic, or ashamed for wanting emotional safety, clarity, and consistency. So, today's episode is a little deeper because I want to talk about the contrast between the men I met through arranged marriage and the men I met through dating apps, and how somewhere between both the experiences, I slowly started losing hope in modern dating altogether. There was a point where opening dating apps started feeling emotionally exhausting. Not because I couldn't find men, but because after a while it felt like I was meeting the same person in different bodies. And honestly, that realization scared me a little. Because for the longest time, I genuinely thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe my expectations were too high. Maybe I was too cautious. Maybe being divorced automatically made me less desirable for something serious. Maybe men saw me as someone temporary. And the worst part is, after enough disappointing experiences, you actually start believing those thoughts. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the strange contrast between arranged marriage meetings and dating app culture because I have experienced both. And somehow, both left me feeling emotionally unsafe in completely different ways. The arranged marriage meetings were always awkward for me, not because the men were necessarily bad people, but because the entire setup felt too serious before there was even basic emotional comfort. Families were involved, everyone was evaluating compatibility, future discussions would start almost immediately. And internally, I would just be sitting there thinking, I don't even know this person yet. It felt strange discussing lifelong compatibility with someone I hadn't even become comfortable around. I never got enough space to naturally know them as people before the topic became marriage. And because of that pressure, I usually said no. Not because I was looking for perfection, not because I thought I was too good for them, but because I never felt emotionally safe enough to picture a future. So, after a point, I thought maybe dating apps would be different. Maybe if I met people independently without family involvement, things would feel more natural, more emotionally genuine. And honestly, initially I did have hope. Because when you meet someone online, there's less pressure in the beginning. You talk casually, you slowly get to know each other. At least that's what I expected. But after a few experiences, I started noticing a pattern, a very disturbing pattern. A lot of these men wanted emotional intimacy without emotional responsibility. They wanted access without clarity. Some of them would say things like, I'm not in the right mental state for relationship. Dating apps feel stressful right now. I'm emotionally confused. I'm not ready for anything serious. And another line I heard repeatedly was, my work is my identity right now. I only want to focus on my career. Relationships distract me, which honestly would have been fair if they were emotionally unavailable across the board. But they weren't, because somehow they still wanted emotional attention, still wanted constant access, the late night conversation, the flirtation, the physical intimacy, and wanted companionship on their terms. They just didn't want the emotional responsibility that comes with genuinely dating someone. And that contradiction started exhausting me. Some of them had no problem talking for hours, no problem discussing physical intimacy, no problem asking for emotional attention, no problem in meeting, and no problem in going on long drives. But suddenly, when it came to simple, normal effort like planning an actual date, showing consistency, being emotionally clear of what they want, that's when the confusion started. And one thing that really affected me emotionally was this. Whenever I clearly communicated that I needed emotional connection before physical intimacy, some of these men reacted very strangely. Instead of respecting the boundary, they treated it like arrogance. A few of them even told me, you have too much attitude, your expectations are unrealistic. This is why men lose interest in you. You'll only attract lustful men with this attitude. And I remember feeling deeply confused hearing that. Because asking for emotional safety before physical intimacy never felt unreasonable to me. It felt responsible. But somewhere along the way, modern dating became so emotionally distorted that boundaries started getting interrupted as ego. And slowly, I started wondering if I was asking for too much, which is honestly sad when I think about it now. Because my expectations were actually very basic. I wasn't asking for luxury, I wasn't asking for perfection, I wasn't asking someone to worship me. I just wanted honesty, consistency, emotional clarity, effort, safety. These are bare minimum things. But modern dating has become so emotionally distorted that bare minimum starts feeling like a huge demand. And slowly, I started internalizing the rejection. I started wondering, maybe they don't take me seriously because I'm divorced. Maybe I am too intense. Maybe I expect too much emotionally. Maybe this generation just doesn't date seriously anymore. And I cannot explain how psychologically damaging that phase was. Because when multiple people behave the same way, your brain stops blaming them individually. You start blaming yourself collectively. And for a while, I did. I genuinely thought something about me was making people emotionally unavailable. Until one day, I started coming across videos, podcasts, posts, conversations online, and women everywhere were describing the exact same experiences, the same inconsistency, the same avoidance, the same emotionally unavailable behavior disguised as confusion, the same men wanting intimacy while being terrified of commitment. And honestly, that realization changed something inside me because I finally understood I was personalizing a cultural problem. Modern dating has normalized emotional unavailability to such an extent that emotionally available people start feeling too much. and that's terrifying. People now romanticize mixed signals: confusion, detachment, lack of effort, as if emotional inconsistency is somehow depth. And I think after enough disappointment, I just became tired. Even opening dating apps started irritating me. Looking at profiles started feeling repetitive. Renewing subscriptions felt meaningless. Every conversation started sounding the same. At some point, you start feeling excited. You just feel emotionally drained. And I think the hardest part of all this was realizing that I never wanted anything extraordinary. I was never chasing perfection. I was looking for emotional safety. And for a long time, I confused my disappointment with having expectations that are too high. But now I see it differently. Wanting honesty is not asking for too much. Wanting consistency is not asking for too much. Wanting emotional maturity is not asking for too much. Wanting clarity is not asking for too much. The real problem is that emotionally unavailable behavior has become so normalized that basic emotional responsibility now feels rare. And honestly, that says more about modern dating culture than it says about me. I think I'm reaching a point where I'm very close to deleting the dating apps completely. Not out of anger, not because I hate men, not because I have become bitter. I think I'm just tired of searching in spaces that keep making emotional inconsistency feel normal. And recently, instead of spending all my energy trying to find the right person, I have started redirecting that energy back towards myself. I have been focusing more on things that genuinely make me feel good: taking care of my skin, exercising, eating healthier, and creating this podcast. Spending more time understanding myself instead of constantly trying to understand emotionally unavailable people. And strangely, that has brought me more peace than dating has in a long time. I think somewhere along the way, I became so focused on finding emotional safety in other people that I forgot to create it within my own life first. And maybe this phase of my life is less about finding love and more about rebuilding my relationship with myself. But I am genuinely curious. Have any of you experienced something similar while dating, especially through dating apps or arranged marriage setups? Have you also felt emotionally exhausted by modern dating culture? Or do you still have hope when it comes to finding emotionally available people? I would honestly love to hear your experiences, because I think one of the loneliest feeling is believing you are the only person going through something until someone else finally says, "Me too."